Hi, Brent. Thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about your run for Secretary of State. I'm wondering if you can just start off by telling us why you're running and why you think you're the best candidate for voters to select.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I would like to say thank you to the Oregonian. I've been reading the Oregonian since I was a young fellow, and I started out with the classifieds, and that was one of my favorite things as a kid is running through the Oregonian on the weekends. Why I'm running, I think, is really the key question here. I have a long history here in Oregon, and I recall one time we had a project. It was McCormick Pier down on NATO Parkway, 388 condos. We would, this is 2003, 2005. We would take a walk from NATO Parkway up Burnside in the evenings during Christmas and Thanksgiving and all the various holidays. We'd enjoy our time. And I found that we could walk. Hi, Carlos. Thanks for joining us. I found that it was enchanting. You could walk through Portland and it was an enchanting environment. It was safe. You could walk through up Burnside, and there was essentially vagrancy was very minimal, in fact. And you had a few people that were struggling with alcoholism. Recently, here in the last, I would say the 20 years, there's been a transition. And having been a person that has traveled quite significantly around the world, in fact, I've seen some of the great cities of Tokyo, Shenzhen, various Asian countries with their beautiful cities, and Europe, and even some parts of Africa, Dubai. And I've looked at these various places, and I look at a comparison of what we had in Portland. In the early 2000s, Portland was considered one of the top or highest ranking cities in the country as it relates to lifestyle, clean living. There was very little litter. There was almost no graffiti and these things. And so I asked myself, well, what has changed? Well, I had a variety of people that came to me and they said, Brent, would you please run for this office? And I decided to, and it was very important to me. And I became, you might say, infected with this drive to start a campaign. This is you might say 8 months ago. And so I made the decision. I was one of the first Republican candidates to make this decision. I say Republican, but quite honestly, I'm very much of a centrist. Having been trained at Pepperdine Law School, Caruso School of Law, we focus on dispute resolution, and that's bringing quite adverse parties together, which I find interesting, going through committee, caucus, deciding what their preferences are on various issues, and making two ends meet. I do not find that there's any solution to be found in pointing fingers, you're bad, I'm good, all that nonsense. That stuff has to stop. We have to unite as a state. And I believe, much like our former great Secretary of State, Governor Tom McCall, and our, let's say, Mark Hatfield, they were both Secretary of States. They ultimately became governors, obviously, and Mark Hatfield became a senator. But the fact is that it was quite a different state. We had high confidence in our state government. You could call any state office and feel like that you were being heard. And I would like to be the voice for the people, all people, not specifically any party, if you will. And I think that's what's going to separate me from some of the other candidates of all parties, is that I'm truly a centrist looking to bring all parties together in a united fashion to bring some unity, balance to Salem. And I think that's a very key ingredient in driving this. So I am Brent Barker, and I am running for Oregon's Secretary of State.
Thank you. So Brent, tell me a little bit more about just kind of how your experience specifically relates to the responsibilities and duties of the Secretary of State?
Thank you, Helen. That's a great question. Well, first of all, I've been in the world of athletics and athletic training. That's building teams. Making a transition into real estate and as a business person, negotiations at very challenging groups, and bringing diverse parties together to meet. I've had a significant amount of experience in the world of philanthropy, charity, working on soup kitchens, homes of hope, building homes for those who do not have a home. These are the things that I have focused on in my career. And I've actually, Helen, I've been working, training for this opportunity my whole life. When I was working within the White House for 4 years in the Office of Advance, I would often go to Embassy Row. I would find great opportunities there because you would share ideas, but they were ideas. And when people were kind and they listened to your ideas and we shared ideas, we'd often come up with better ideas. And I think that's what we need here in the state of Oregon.
Okay. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of your responses to the questionnaire that we sent out. And you were talking about restoring faith in elections, et cetera. But one of the things that you mentioned was about an in-person voting requirement. And I wanted to make sure I understand that. Are you talking about rolling back mail-in vote by mail?
Well, once again, I think this is going to be the central question of the 2024 election cycle in Oregon. And the reason I say that is because many voters, I'm not saying all voters, and if you're in the winning majority, you would say this is really working for us. And all I'm saying is there are voices to be heard, and they are curious as to the validity of our cast voting record, which has very few audits to it. They are curious to a variety of things as it pertains to how the ballots are coming in, they're being counted. They would just like to know that their voice is being heard, those individual voters, and they are not being disenfranchised. So as I make a proposal, my plan, if you will, Oregon's organic voting initiative, if you will, the idea is only to bring a proposal to the table, to start a discussion and get to a better solution. Because right now, I believe there was one audit of 4,400 voters in Washington County. Of those 4,400 voters, I believe my understanding is that there were some 13% that had deceased. That was just one small audit. The reality is, as our voting system is, and our cast voting record, that means the total ballots may be in excess of actual voters, one. Two, there may be other issues out there to where you might have one home receiving more than one ballot. I believe there's a lot of, we used to be able to go in to our library and vote one day, have the results that evening, and every county deliver their results with observers in place of all parties, or both parties, if you will. And I think that is something that we should look at. I'm not saying there isn't some way in which we could bring a hybrid together, but I do believe it is a subject matter that where there's a lot of voters that feel like they're being disenfranchised and are not being heard right now. That's all I'm suggesting, Helen.
Okay. I'm sorry that I'm not familiar with the audit that you mentioned, so I'm wondering if maybe you can follow up and send me a link to it or a little bit more information about that audit.
Yeah, it's something I found within one document, and like any of these things, I'm like you. I always question all you might say data, but I think these things should be looked at. There's other facts that I can share with you, and we can move that discussion along off this call.
Okay, great. Um, that would be a significant change, however, to look to adopt an in-person voting element or in-person voting, and it sounds like as opposed to any vote by mail.
Well, no, not any vote by mail, because we obviously need vote by mail for our military. We obviously may need some modifications for some of our senior citizens. I know my own mother, she's in her 90s, and she would love to be able to go to our library and vote in person and show her ID respectfully. That to me is imperative. I believe all people would love to show their ID and vote and take. And quite honestly, there's more to it. I believe that there should be a complete, you might say, a voting holiday with tax credits to employers. I think that should be a 1 day off. So there's no excuse that we can't make this happen, to where we can. And that's the reason I call it the organic voting a holiday or voting measure, is because it's really getting people back together, not separating us, dividing us. We need to unite. We need to come together and stop this littering business. This state used to be so clean. Now it's become like a vogue opportunity is to litter. I see people just randomly dropping trash on the street now. And I know this is, but I think a lot of our problems could be solved by improving our voting system. And it's not a matter of how many ballots you can get out. It's a matter of how many voters can you count. And so whatever we do in this regard, we just want to make sure that everyone's voice is being heard, that is an authentic voter. And we need to clean up. And that's the reason I'm suggesting that we, much like our driver's license, that the cast voting record is essentially reset to 0. We take that opportunity to then engage in new voting registration for all people. And then after so many years, I'm just throwing out 8 years, that they have to then register to vote again, show up on a voting holiday, and submit their ID, and bring in the technologies that are available to bring efficiencies to the discussion. But I do think that having paper ballots in place afterwards, and then if there is you might say, if there is a 51% tie, you might say, we have a automatic recount. But once again, Helen, I'm just trying to say we have to, there's a huge group of people out there that are discussing this, and they would just like to have their voice heard. They do not feel like their voice is being heard right now. And a lot of people enjoy in-person voting with an ID.
Right. I guess, you're introducing a lot of or changing to a paper ballot in-person kind of system, and talks about introducing a lot of disruption into a massive system that does not have any, there's no evidence of widespread fraud. So recognizing that there are people who are raising questions about it, I guess I'm wondering, why would you want to introduce a lot of disruption when there hasn't been any evidence of widespread fraud?
Because I believe everybody's voice should be heard.
And do you feel, okay.
I mean, there's obviously people that absolutely believe in the mail-in system, and they believe that brings unity to the community. I'd love to see a day where we all had the day off and we actually met and broke bread together, and actually met and in person and went through and made our voting known. Like I said, this is only a proposal to introduce something that has come to my attention that's very important to a lot of people. I personally enjoy the mail-in system at times, but there are also times where I go, boy, it should be nice to be able to go down to the library and go through an in-person voting process. So maybe there's a hybrid solution. I'm just throwing out ideas, so that I have a plan in place, rather than just someone that is just trying to do the same old thing over and over again, expecting different results and getting the same result.
Okay, thank you. Um, there's measure slated for the November ballot to asking voters if they want to adopt ranked choice voting for statewide and federal elections, or for state and federal elections, I should say. Do you support that measure?
Helen, I tell you, you are asking some great questions. Okay, here's the point on ranked choice voting, and it goes to our prior question. What ranked choice voting does, it absolutely, unbelievably banks on and guarantees the machine responsibility to count all ballots. Hand counted ballots is a preference for a lot of people that look for authenticity in our democracy or a republic. They look for this hand counted ballot with eyeballs of each party. I believe transparency involves that. Machines, a lot of people do not trust them. There have been some results, and we could go over this in detail. But once again, this is just one of these things where ranked choice voting can take somebody that actually got, say, third place, and all of a sudden they're just moved up to first place. And that's the reality, or second place. We recently saw that in a runoff vote in the state party here, and where a third place person was essentially moved to first place. These ranked choice voting opportunities do occur. I'm only suggesting that before we move additional layers of complexity on top of what we already have, we fix what we have or make a hybrid of what we have to ensure that everybody has a level of trust in our current system before we add another layer of complexity to it. We do not want to be machines. We do not want artificial intelligence telling us what to do. We do not want the artificial intelligence invading our privacies. These are the realities. And there's a lot of people that are in fear of that. You know, I'm a very independent person, but as well, you know, I believe in humanity and the humanity's liberties. And those liberties include our first, second, and all of our amendments, which have been in our US Constitution. So I remember one time, if I could say this, 2008, we had a real problem, right? If you remember our subprime collapse. And I remember I was in this large class. It was a business class, and people were very confused. They were scared, in fact, as they should be. It was a horrible time. We all, you know, learned how to protect the downside. In that discussion, I just raised my hand. I said, "Can I just say something?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you know, when there's confusion, there's chaos, and there's a lot of calamity, why don't we just consider following our rules? Let's start with our Constitution." And I said, that will help us more than anything else when it comes to a lot of these issues. So I'm a big rule follower. And it goes with the Oregon legislature, if they change the rules, I follow the rules. I'm about following rules, not breaking rules, changing rules, modifying rules, walking back statements. You'll never see me walk back a statement. I'll say, yeah, I love to negotiate. So I'm only looking to bring some voters' voice to the table that feel like they haven't been heard. I want to make sure that the transparency is there so that the issues that we have had in the past do not occur again. There's certain things that should not be happening. I recall, let me ask that because I think this is going to lead into one of your questions today. And there was a situation where somebody offered me, I think it was minimal amount of money. It was a campaign event, and it was in cash. And I said, well, thank you very much for that opportunity, but I really wish you'd just go through our official mechanisms of donations at our website. It goes through the Anodot systems, properly recorded through our excellent ORSTAR system at the Secretary of State's office. That's what I'd much prefer, because I do believe, and there's a lot of things I really want to applaud our current governor for, and I want to work with our current governor. And I think she's doing an excellent job, quite honestly. So,
great.
Yeah, we can follow up on that if you'd like.
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit more about campaign finance. And as you know, the legislature passed and the governor just signed 4024, which introduces a pretty complicated program with limits on multiple kinds of donations, as well as disclosure requirements and a slew of other new aspects to campaign finance. I guess, first of all, I'm wondering, can you tell me what is your experience putting in place a complicated program?
A complicated program?
Mm-hmm.
I might say by fire hose, I've put together complicated programs on a weekly basis. When you fly into a new city, you have to bring adverse, challenging, different parties together, everything from fire department to Secret Service to you name it, police department, marshals, political action groups, and you bring them around table and you put together a plan and you have to manifest that over a week. Well, I did that for a number of years. That's one. Two, when you're putting
In what role? I'm sorry, if you can just tell me a little bit more about just like what that was for.
Well, that was with the Office of Advance, and that's what we do in the Office of Advance. We prepare for our leadership, in this case, the President of the United States arrival and both arrival and departure. And every step and every minute, every second has to be accounted for properly. It's not an easy task. And then when it comes to business, this happens countless times where you can avert difficult problems if you just trust but verify. And I'm a real big one on trust and verify. I've saved a lot of people from major mistakes, from essentially verifying documents, things like this, going through a variety of different opportunities in negotiation to actual execution, to put or manifesting a development or helping to be a part of that team, because it's always a part of a team. It's always part of a team, and you've got to bring different people, and all those people have to have their voices heard. I have a law class, and we taught is a public policy, and I have this one lady. Our values are clearly different, clearly different people in a lot of our values. And I just recall the other day when we finished the call, she said, "Brent, I would vote for you because I know that you listen to me each and every time." Well, I listened. Not only that, but she's articulate, smart. She puts things together, and she has a skill set that I don't have, maybe. And that's the way in which I'm sure John does this with your team there at the Oregonian. You bring things together. Some people are better at one thing than the other, and but somebody has to lead, somebody has to follow, right? And somebody essentially has to just follow. That's just the way it works. And you have to be a supportive team member. So sometimes you want to play that role of just being a supportive team member. And that's what I believe the Secretary of State should do. Secretary of State should bring unity, listen to all people. And that's my position as an Oregon. I've been training my whole life to be an ambassador, to be a person of goodwill, to bring truth and honesty and integrity. Because this last situation, and you're probably going to lead into it, is our prior experience with our past Secretary of State. I've listened to her, and Ms. Fagan, I think she was quite honestly intelligent, bright, passionate. She brought a lot to the table. And but there's certain things that I think experience, just a little bit of wisdom would have helped her quite tremendously if she had the opportunity to just rethink some of the things that she had done. She made it clear, though, when she was running for her candidacy, that she believes in this certain package of benefits when you're in office. And I don't think anybody should be, you might say, I don't think anybody should run for public office when their experience, their education is commensurate with asking for public service. I don't think you should really necessarily be doing it in a way in which you must, where it becomes a compensation package. That's kind of a little bit of a red flag. I understand that this is basically a small stipend. You run for an office, you're essentially a volunteer. And so I remember going back to campaign finance at another campaign event. I recall some folks, and they were running for state rep. You might have to drive 15 minutes one way or another to cover your territory for this state rep. not to mention names or anything else. And someone at the end of the meeting, they said, well, how much do you think you'll have to raise for this, was essentially, I think, about $37,000 a year. How much do you think you have to raise? And he said, $1 million. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. $1 million for a 37. If that were a business plan, that would be the most ridiculous business plan I've ever seen. I'm a businessman, and I'm Brent Barker, and I'm running for Oregon Secretary of State.
I just have one last question and then you can wrap up. But, you know, when I was trying to set this up, I wanted to have both you and Dennis Linthicum on the same Zoom. You declined to, and you know, I want you to be able to kind of explain your reasons for that. But I guess the question I have for you is, if you're unwilling to participate in an interview over Zoom with another person with whom you strongly disagree, how can we be assured, or how can voters be assured that you're not going to similarly ice out someone else while you're in office?
Fantastic question. I appreciate that you asked that, Helen. I would just have to say that, one, thank you for working to accommodate a very busy campaign schedule. I am literally speaking 2 to 3 times daily at a variety of different groups. 1. 2, I've been in this race for quite a while now, numerous months, and even before I registered with our Secretary of State. By the way, our current Secretary of State is doing an excellent job. Okay. 3, there was a gentleman that called me. Well, let's just put it this way. I met a gentleman at a function, and he was at that function, and he said on stage, and they denounced our prior president. Well, that's fine. Everybody has their own opinion. But it raised kind of a curiosity in me, because I was just curious. You run as a Republican. It's kind of a, well, anyway, it is what it is. So I went out and asked him, and he said, well, you have your opinion, Brent, and I have my opinion. Well, it's kind of started there, and I was kind of curious. Well, the day of, we had like 15 minutes left on the Secretary of State in order to enter your name to run for a public office. Okay. Well, he called me, and I said, how are you doing? And he said, I'm this guy, and so on and so forth. And I said, okay, well, did you not, because I believe there was an election, but it was almost like 70%, 68 or 69%, that 10 absences and you're out. And I said, and you can't run for your current office? He said, yes. And well, I then come to find out that his wife would be running for his office. He would be her advisor, and then he would run for Secretary of State, and she would be his advisor. Well, if we're just going to continue doing the same old thing, conflict of interest aside, I think that's a bad idea. Okay, that's just another item. A variety of other things which include activities or litigations, you might say, against our current Secretary of State, or the majority party. I'm not looking to take that type of activity and move it towards. I'm looking to make friends. In fact, I just had a great meeting with one of the administration in Salem this last week, who is a Democrat, a couple actually. I'm getting to know them as individuals and people that I absolutely adore. That's what I'm doing as Brent Barker, candidate for Secretary of State. And I do believe that this other individual with this activity, as it relates to, is a conflict of interest. I do believe that you have to follow the rules. It means if you go back in at 9 absences, you don't want to break the rules. This was nearly 70% of the voters approved this measure. This has been signed into a law. The Oregon Supreme Court validated it and reinstituted it. I mean, how much more do we need to know? And so, yeah, validity of a candidate is important to me, and we just can't keep on doing the same old thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. You see the indications about candidates and people by the little things, not the big things, just the little things. And that kind of rolls over and rolls over. And then what we'll find out is something will happen and all of a sudden triggers, oh, wow. Well, they tell us all this right before they become candidates. I'm the most transparent person in the room, especially when it comes to all this. I will be a great Secretary of State in the model of Governor and Secretary of State Tom McCall that kept Oregon green and litter free. I am the candidate that has walked most of John Muir Trail. I am definitely want to protect our nature, our forests, and that's a big part of this opportunity is you want to do that, but we have to also protect those forests from forest fires. So there's a lot of discussion. We have to have balance in this room.
Great. And I'm sorry, I did also want to see if anyone else on the call wants to jump in with any questions. No? Okay, great. Then if you want to just kind of give a quick wrap up about, why you're running or anything that you want to emphasize, feel free.
God bless you, Helen. Thank you for everybody at the Oregonian. I do enjoy your magazine, or excuse me, paper. And I appreciate all the hard work you do. To me, the endorsement from the Oregonian as at least the Republican candidate would be one of the highest honors I would have in my life. And I really do appreciate that. So I'm just an honest businessman that is trying to make a difference in the state I love. And I've been an Oregonian my whole life. And I used to, growing up in Raleigh Hills and Aloha High School, the thing, and I lived in Bend for many years. I started the athletic club of Bend back in the early 90s. So I have a wide-reaching experience around this state, and I love this state. And I do want to, I have an empathetic heart, and I do want to be a part of the solution and healing process for the state of Oregon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.